Hello everyone, thank you for joining the session today. I think we'll make a start. So I'll first hand over to Paul.
Thanks, Emma, and hello everybody. I won't say good afternoon because I'm conscious we have quite a few time zones here, so good time wherever it is where you're coming from. So this is the second webinar for the UAS challenge we've done. So there's a chance today to talk you through a number of things. As we head now into the main documentation to be produced, and then heading into the build and the flight readiness review. So today's chance is to run through some top tips from the judges. So Lambert will cover this into the sort of the FRR and what you should be thinking about. A bit of time on the explain model. So again, to allow you to get prepared for that. Before we sort of come to sort of top tips to the actual flight event itself as well now. So we'll get through those issues and I'll allow each of the areas, Lambert, Kristina, and Rod, to introduce themselves as they come through the each of their topics. Before we do that, though, it's really great that we've got Andrew. I think it's Andrew. Hopefully, Andrew's here. Andrew Gibson from Maxon, who's one of our sponsors, to talk through a little bit about the company, but also about use of motors on drones. I think that'll be quite an interesting start to this webinar, rather than just us talking through the rules, etc. So, with further ado, and conscious of time, Andrew, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Yes.
Great. I'll hand you over. So, hi, Andrew. The floor's yours.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. Hello, everyone. Right. So, as Paul said, yeah, I'm Andrew Gibson. I'm the aerospace sales engineer for Maxon UK and Ireland. I'll just a quick introduction of my background. So I'm a qualified mechanical engineer. I've been working in industry for over 30 years now. I turned to the dark side of engineering sales in 2005, and I've spent just over the last 8 years working in the electrical motor arena. So, go to the next slide, please. So a quick introduction to Maxon. So Maxon is a Swiss business. So we're family owned and we're headquartered in Saxon, which is in central Switzerland. We've got over 3,000 employees worldwide, and we're manufacturing over 5 million motor combinations every year. So that's over 20,000 motors every day. So within the business, we've got everything we need with sort of all design, development, and manufacturing, and including some special capabilities within there for sort of doing our own winding technology. So we've got our own patented winding, but we also do our own injection molding. We also have a ceramic and metal injection molding in the facility. We manufacture our own gearheads, sensors, and motor controllers. So yeah, it's wide variety. So where is Maxon used? We're used anywhere from 6,000 meters below the surface of the sea to Mars and beyond. We have quite a good kudos in that we can actually state that anything that has moved on Mars has had Maxon product on board. So yeah, we used to work operating in challenging environments such as aerospace and defence. We also do a lot of medical devices as well. So, and even to the tune of motors embedded in the human body for things like heart assist pumps and drug delivery. So just a quick overview. So if we move on to the next slide. And it looks like there's some pictures gone missing here. So just a quick introduction to the types of drone, and I'm sure you're all quite aware of the different things, different types. So there's a fixed wing. It looks like a standard aircraft where you've got the propulsion to drive the motor forwards, the fixed wing giving you the lift. On the right there, we've got what we see as in a lot of the arena as drones now, where you've got a multi-rotor quadcopter, hexacopter, as such things. And then in the middle, you've got something that combines the both, where you can have a fixed wing drone that is capable of vertical takeoff and landing. So the fixed wing is good for long range, high flight speed. It's not particularly manoeuvrable, but then the multicopter dynamic flight is brilliant. Can take off and land in with no space, can carry some high payloads, and the VTOL sits there in between, so it takes the best parts of both and combines them. Move on to the next slide, please. Oh, there we go. We've got all the pictures now. So first and foremost, on your drone, we're looking at propulsion. So all these drones now that are coming on, they're the battery powered. So we're looking at an efficient drive system. So it's not just the motor as such that needs to be efficient. You've got to look at it as an overall propulsion package. So that includes your motor, your motor controller, and also your propeller. So you've got to match them all up to get your most efficient drive system. So your propulsion system really is specified for what you need to do for your flight requirements. If you're using a multicopter, you've got to have sufficient thrust there from your 4 or 6 motors and propellers to lift your drone and the payload as well that you're carrying. And then on the fixed wing, you need sufficient thrusts to get through takeoff. And then once you get into forward flights and you're flying, then you can really ease back on the power for your long duration. So very much the same for all. It's looking at an efficient system. And next slide, please. Then we'll go on to flight surface actuation. So this is more on the fixed wing aircraft. So the ailerons, elevators and tail will all need to actuate. There's various different options you can use, from your radio controlled servos, readily available from the shops, and then the top right there's some more specific aircraft or airspace qualified servos on the market. And then sort of something that we can do as Maxon is we can do some linear actuators where you've got motor gearbox and ball screw. What you use or what drone manufacturers are using is very much dependent on their specification criteria, for space envelope, safety requirements, and budget as well. If you start looking at qualified products, then there's costs associated with that. Next slide, please. And then you're down to your mission, so your payload. So what are you doing with the drone? Are you looking at some form of imaging, scanning system? Have you got a camera on there or a LiDAR system? In which case you'll have something like the top right there, where you have a motorized gimbal which is stabilized to compensate for the vibrations in the drone. So each axis in that product will have a motor in there just to provide the stabilization. And if you're doing a delivery system, how do you get let what you're delivering leave your drone? Do you land, or as with a company that we've been working with, looking at deliveries, actually winch down the package, so the drone stays in the sky and keeps the spinning propellers away from the public when they are delivering. So it's looking at what you need to do with the mission that you're developing your drones for. So next slide, please. So that's just a quick overview of the types of applications where electric motors are used on the drones. Are there any questions out there? And if you go on to the next slide, there's my contact details should anybody need them. Any questions? No.
I think we're having a bit of a slide faff as well, Andrew, sorry. But okay, any hands up? No. Okay, that's really useful. Thanks, really interesting. Thank you, and thanks for coming along today to present. Interesting. I must admit, it's your company I didn't know much about, so it's been really interesting to see what's out there. So that's really interesting. So thank you very much for taking the time. You might well get some after when people have sort of thought about it, but that's really handy. So thank you. Got your contact details in front of me. Just want to check. Kristina, can you see the slides now?
Yeah, we can.
That's great. That's great. The wonders of Teams. Who knows? I could see them, so there we go. Cool. Okay, that's great. Thanks, Andrew. It's really appreciated. So I think we'll now step on to an update from the judges, and that'll probably step directly into FRR, I should say. So I'll hand over to Lambert now from the head judge's point of view, and some guidance and updates as to this point of the competition. Hi, Lambert.
Hello, Paul. Thank you, and hello, everybody. I'm Lambert. I look after the judging. I just seen a question coming through from Edward saying, I thought image recognition was excluded from the requirements this year, and that's correct. I think Andrew was just talking about some of the things that Maxon as a company do, and not specifically about the challenge today. But moving on to the challenge and where we're at, if we could go to the first slide, please. Thank you, Emma. The design and development specification, the deadline for that was yesterday. I did notice that many of you left it to the last minute. In fact, one team managed to post theirs at 1 minute to midnight. I think you might think in future that leaving it that late is risky if something goes wrong. I know one team had trouble uploading their document. And so we don't mind at all if you post them early. It eases our workload a bit, spreads it out a bit if we get them earlier. So please don't feel you need to leave it to the very last minute. And do remember that your academic supervisor is supposed to be signing off your completed documents as well. So I don't know how many academic supervisors were up at midnight last night. But as far as the design and development specification goes, we're hoping to get, and thank you for uploading them, and at a very quick glance, a lot of them are looking very good, that we hope to give you feedback on them by around about the 17th of April. So in about a month's time, the team of judges will be going through them all and coming back with what I hope will be some helpful feedback as well as your scores. Moving on to the CDR, the Critical Design Review. Some of you already submitted yours because you will recall you submit them at the date that you specified in your concept paper. But those of you who haven't so far done so, can I remind you to submit them on the date that you specified? And secondly, please follow precisely the deliverable requirements. And so we do make it clear in the rules what we're expecting to see. And so it's helpful, and you score maximum points if you do what we ask you to submit. I see another question. The next thing is the explain model, which Kristina will go through with you in detail, and that's due on the 2nd of June, which I think is the correct date, but Kristina will correct that if I've got that wrong, as someone has thought it was due on the 5th of June, but we'll come to that later. And then the FRR is due on the 16th of June, and we'll go through that in a few moments to give you some update, well, some advice on how to submit that. So if we can go to the next slide, please, Emma. This is just a reminder of a sort of typical development timeline for an aerospace development program. And so I must say I would have expected to have seen more of your CDRs by now, because they should really be at the time when you've completed design and before you move on to manufacture, and you should very shortly be getting into starting your testing. But that's just a reminder of what we would see as a typical timeline for an aerospace development program of this sort. So if we move on now to talk about the FRR, so the next slide, please. So the whole point of an FRR is for you to confirm that your UAS is ready and safe to fly at the demonstration event. And it is a formal requirement that we place on you before you can proceed to the event. So it is quite important that you pay attention to what's required of an FRR. I mean, you should be doing something of this sort yourselves before you even start your test flying. And if you go through the process that we require you to submit to us, if you do that before you start your demonstration flying, you're more likely to not end up crashing on your first flight, and certainly making sure that you're legal to fly. Okay, on to the next one, please. So the deliverables on the FRR is a video, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. And so there's a whole series of documents with the FRR, a statement of changes that you've made since your design and development specification. So any significant changes to your design that may have arisen out of your ground or flight testing needs to be written up and sent to us in the FRR. We want to see your pre-flight checklist, what you go through before you fly, which is an important safety procedure as you start to fly. We want to see if we've raised a corrective action to you in either the design and development specification or in our CDR feedback. We want you to play those back to us and exactly what you've done about correcting it. So these generally are safety issues that we've spotted in your submissions. We want you to state what your team pilot's experience is, and we need a written declaration, and the detail of that is shown in the rules, by a chartered engineer or equivalent senior engineer to check over your finished model that it's going to be likely to be ready and safe to fly. And then there is the Form 701, which is a sort of formal document. And again, there's advice on the website about the detail of that, and an illustration come up there. Now, I wanted to raise that now because one of the things that you're going to have to put in there and sign off on are your public liability insurance, your team pilot personal accident insurance, medical insurance if you're a non-UK team, and your CAA Opera ID and Flyer ID. Now, don't leave these to the last minute, and so don't wait to the 16th of June or the 15th of June to set about getting those sorted. Do think about those early on and make sure that those are all in place by the time you have to submit your FRR, because they're really important and are a condition of flying at Buckminster. Okay, on to the next slide, please. So the video, just to explain what we're after on the video, the purpose of that is to show that you have done some development test flying, and so we can be as certain as possible that you'll turn up to Buckminster, get onto the flight line, and will be ready to go and have a very good chance that you'll be able to score some decent points and not lose your aircraft on its first flight. And so what we're looking for you to present in your video is just a simple continuous sequence showing takeoff, or for those of you catapult launching, your catapult launch, and then just do a very simple controlled flight so that you can go around a circuit, nothing very extensive, but you know, that you're programmed in some waypoints and you just go around some form of circuit and then come in and land. But it must be clear on this video if any of those segments that are presented are under manual control. Now, we're not requiring you to air release your payload, as certainly in the UK that's not legal in most areas. We are able to do it at Buckminster, but if you're doing it at your university or whatever, it would not be legal for you to air release your payload. So we just want the video to show a ground demonstration of the release system. Now, your video should be no longer than 10 minutes, and we don't want any fancy productions. We just want to see that the thing flies properly. So no music or other embellishments to distract us from examining how well your aircraft flies. And again, on the right there, you'll see the FRR has details about what we require there as well. So if we now just go on to the next slide, please. It was just a quick reminder of the scoring. Oh, yes, that's the one, yes. And so the scoring in the rules is laid out, and really to point out that the explained simulation that Kristina's about to talk about is worth a lot of points, and therefore please pay a lot of attention to what Kristina's saying, because that will make a big difference to your overall score when you come to the flight demonstration event. And although the flight readiness review is only worth 20 points, it is essential that you complete that to be given permission to fly at the flight demonstration event. So it's a really important document, although it doesn't attract that many points in the overall scheme of things. And then the next slide just simply reminds you of the mission scoring. 500 points this year. We've got a lot more points this year for the mission, and it's split out, and again that's all explained in the rules. But it is a single mission that you do. You take off, you go around the course, you release your payload, and then if you've still got power left, you continue on while still flying the endurance part of the circuits and come back and land. And the total mission time is a maximum of 15 minutes. If you're still flying after 15 minutes, you won't score anything for doing so. Again, all this is laid out in detail in the rules, and I would commend you to look at them carefully. And we give you up to 3 attempts at your mission this year, and unlike last year where we had some complicated averaging of scores, this year we're just taking the highest score from your 3 attempts. And so whichever attempt scores the highest will be the scores that we record. Okay, so I think it's now time to hand on to Kristina. Oh, and Rod, do you want to say anything? Sorry, before we go on to that, Rod, on the FRR.
Nothing really, other than just, yes, to add the paperwork, although a little bit of a chore, that's aviation engineering for you. We do need that. So do have a close look at what you're completing on the forms prior to the submission. But that's it from me, thanks.
Okay, happy to move on. So quick introduction for myself. My name's Kristina Panikkar, and I am the program manager for the UAS challenge. I also look after the X-plane stuff. So my background is I am an aerospace engineer, and this is what I do in my time as a hobby as well. So I'm just going to talk you through some of the key requirements for the X-plane model and some of the things you really need to be aware of. So first of all, the purpose of this is to demonstrate your final design and provide a method of testing the performance of your aircraft. X-plane and simulation software is something that is being used more and more within the aerospace and mechanical environment within the UK and international. It's part of that key design process now to test different aspects of your design, not just the final design. You should be using this throughout to have a look at configurations, payloads, weight and balance distribution, etc. So that's why this has been developed and put in as part of the core requirements. And as you've seen, there are 150 points available for this section. And that's because we wanted to emphasize just how important this role is now within the engineering environment, especially when it comes to developing a small UAS. So there are 150 points available for this, this part of the competition. There are 2 aspects you'll be scored on, what we call a pilot handbook, and that is something that you would be required to, in the real world, give along with your UAS, so the pilot understands how the aircraft is being operated and what are those key design features that they need to be aware of as well. And then the X-plane model, so the actual model that you submit that should represent your final aircraft. So within section E7 of the rules, so the 2023 rules, I've laid out there an exact process that you need to follow in order to provide a single compressed zip file that contains the airplane. This is an ACF file, objects, textures, etc., and all the subfolders that it contains. Please do not go in and alter any of those subfolder headings. You can, the overarching zip file, there is a specific format that it needs to be in, including the name that allows us to process it. Just putting your UAS name or reference number means that we can't identify when we load it into X-plane. So please follow those instructions so carefully. You don't want, after all that work, for your aircraft to be confused with another university's. And then that takes more time out of us and the pilots who are going to be flying these aircraft to try and figure that out. And that cuts into then the time that you have to actually score some of these points within the competition. The next part is the aircraft will be viewed in PlaneMaker. So we will open those files that you've been developing in the same way that you would see them. We'll be looking at key design features such as what your payload weight is, whether you've put the payload in correctly as we've stated, your energy battery requirements as well, what you've been specifying in your CDR and your design spec, design and development specification. We'll be looking to see if those match. So we want to see that actually you've developed an aircraft, but you've carried those key design features for you. So we'll be doing a random check of that. The pilot handbook that you submit along with your submission should identify how each of the aircraft are operated. Do you have brakes? Do you have to go through a specific process in order to start up the engines? Do you want different propellers started up at each time? They're the key features that we need to see so that the pilot, you only get 2 runs at the competition, and you get a maximum of 15 minutes to do them. If your pilot has to spend 12 minutes figuring out how to operate your aircraft, then you only actually have 3 minutes to complete and aim points for the actual run through the competition that your aircraft will do. So it's really important that you really go through and go, right, from start to finish, how do we operate this aircraft, and how do we need to tell this pilot, as you run through it yourself, what the information needs to do, because we can't come and ask you questions. Once this is submitted, that's what we need to see and what we're going on about. What we have had additional in, there are limitations with any simulation software. So this is something that you need to be aware of within the engineering process, and what your choice of software you'll be using for simulation. Obviously, we've mandated for this competition, you need to use X-Plane 10 or 11. So we know there are limitations. Within that pilot handbook, put a section in for any changes you needed to make to your aircraft in order to meet those X-Plane limitations. For example, if you wanted to put a really bizarre 12 propellers on your aircraft, and X-Plane only allows you to put in 6 aerofoils, then you could explain, right, actually, we've only put in these 6 because of this limitation. Or say you've had to change some of the requirements because you've realized that your payload actually cannot carry the weight that you have designed for. You will put that in and explain and provide some justification as to why and what your process was for you to discover that. If you put those in, we will mark the aircraft as if that is the final aircraft, and that will take that into consideration when we're doing that check of your aircraft key characteristics within X-Plane, within the plane maker, sorry. So it's important that you go through this process and you demonstrate to us that you've used this simulation software, and you've also taken appreciation to what that is within your overarching engineering design process. So that's what this part of the competition is to teach you. And it's so important within real life engineering that we go back and we do this over and over again as well. So we're not asking you to do anything that we don't actually have to do as part of our day jobs as well. Could we go to the next slide, Emma? Okay, so within the second part of the scoring for the X-Plane, as I said, your X-Plane, your aircraft will be flown through an X-Plane environmental model of the competition course. So you can see from this picture, this is a previous year's entry that actually, I think it was the 2021 winner. But the course will be laid out and you'll have a specific area to go through and 2 flagpoles that will represent the waypoints. And these are the same waypoints as have been done in Buckminster. So we've actually modelled Buckminster as well. So it should be exactly the same. You get 2 attempts for each aircraft. These are limited, as in the real life competition, to 15 minutes each. There are factors that we need to consider. So your, again, maximum airspeed, it's the same as what the actual competition is. So your aircraft will never be flown above that. And if your aircraft does fly highly above that maximum speed, that's something else that needs to be in your pilot handbook. This is what your this is the fleet speed that you want the pilot to fly at. Otherwise, we will fly it as close to the maximum speed as possible to stay in those legal requirements. In order to score, your aircraft must successfully load and complete the course to earn points for this element of scoring. So you get 2 attempts. Out of those 2 attempts, as long as it starts and completes the course as per the rules of the real competition, you will score for those. And it's just the top, just one set of scoring is your best scoring, and that's what will be done. It's really important that you test the actual compression of the zip file and then load it into a fresh version of X-Plane. Just because it works for yourselves, when I load it into my version, X-Plane remembers X-Plane remembers the information that you've already put it in. So even if you shut it down and start again, it will not do that. Completely do it in a fresh install of X-Plane or a computer that has not been used with an X-Plane on to do any of your development work. Otherwise, it will remember the settings that you've put in, and that means that there's a high likely that when we test it, they will not be in those settings on our computer. So it's very important that you do that, and do that 2 or 3 times. Just make sure that that is correct. As I said before, if any team is unable to get their aircraft working in its design configuration, e.g. multicopters, changes to be made to produce a working aircraft, these must be explained in the pilot handbook. We're not just looking to see what your final design here, we're looking at your engineering development process and how you've taken in all those key considerations. It's important that you develop your X-plane throughout your design process. Please don't leave it to the week before, because when you're using X-plane, there are little bits that you need to go away, practice on, and find solutions to. All this activity can be done on the free version of X-plane and PlaneMaker. That's completely sufficient for you. You will not be getting a copy of the environmental model. That is for us only to run the competition. As per, it would be exactly the same in the real life competition. You know, you can't go practice at Buckminster and do the complete waypoints. The waypoints would only be given on the day of competition within the real life competition. So we do not give this out beforehand. And that is the only aspect that you would actually need a paid copy of X-plane for. Right, that is me. Emma, I will say the 2023 rules say 5th of June. I'm happy to keep it to the 5th of June. Do not submit your X-plane model at 1 minute to the deadline, because if it doesn't work at that 1 minute to the deadline, you have missed your deadline. If you want to submit it 2-3 days before, I'm happy. I download them as they come in, and I will check the submission model. If it doesn't work, I will come back to you before the 5th of June and say it doesn't work, have one more chance. If you leave it to 1 minute to midnight, I will not be doing that, because on the morning of the 6th of June, they will be flown. I've got 2 days to fly these aircraft with my pilots, so they will be flown then. That gives us enough time to actually analyse all the results, because if you've ever had a look at an X-plane environmental model and the output, it's pages and pages of data that then we need to go analyse. So please be really considerate of that. Everyone does this in their spare time. So we need to be very strict on these deadlines. Thank you. That's me done.
Thank you, Kristina. Thank you for clarifying about the X-plane submission deadline as well. So yeah, just a few final reminders from me. So first of all, I just want to remind you about a couple of mentoring opportunities that are available. The first one is that each team can book an hour-long virtual session with a member of their steering group to ask for any advice and guidance. These are people at the top of their fields who know everything about the competition. So this is a great opportunity to get some tips and advice from them. So I would encourage teams to take advantage of that. Secondly, we have the mentoring scheme, which pairs an industry partner with a UAS team on a random basis. The scheme aims to provide teams with a point of contact for general queries regarding the plan, design, build, test and marketing of their UAS. It aims to help the teams integrate with the concept of the challenge and provides teams with general advice and guidance. Industry partners will use this as an opportunity to look for future talent. So again, this is an opportunity I would encourage teams to take advantage of. To register your interest in either scheme, just email the UAS challenge email address in the first instance and we'll get you registered for those. Next, just a few notices about the fly-off event in June. So the fly-off event will take place on the 26th to the 29th of June at BMFA Buckminster, so the same site as we used last year. One important notice about the arrival times. So teams must arrive between 2 o'clock and 6 o'clock on Monday, the 26th of June. There will be an essential briefing that all teams must attend at 6 o'clock in the evening of Monday, the 26th of June, and this briefing will not be repeated. So it is important that teams are on site by 6 o'clock on the Monday. Just in terms of travel and accommodation, teams are responsible for their own travel. In terms of accommodation, the nearest towns are Melton, Mowbray and Grantham, and there are accommodation opportunities available locally, but free camping facilities will also be available on site. Showers and toilets and full facilities will be available as well. In terms of catering, there is a catering van that will be available during the day for breakfast, lunch and snacks throughout. In terms of dinner, we would strongly encourage teams to bring their own food for dinner, so you can have food on the campsite. The catering van, at the moment, it's looking like they will close sort of at the end of the day when the sort of competition finishes for the day. So in terms of dinner, we would strongly recommend you bring food for that. And also just a notice to put, so please make sure you prepare for the English weather. For international teams, please do email the UAS Challenge email address if for any shipping guidance and also any visa support letter requests. One thing I do want to highlight about shipping is that there are new procedures in place since last year due to Brexit. So please do make sure you are fully prepared and for any shipping to make sure things don't get stuck in customs. We will be issuing full guidance for this shortly, but if you have any questions in the meantime, please do email into the UAS Challenge inbox and we'll help with those. Finally, I just want to remind everyone that if you haven't already done so, you can apply for your airdrop box system for testing ahead of the fly-off event. In order to receive your airdrop box, please email Michael Cook. His email address is on the screen there, with the following information. So he'll need your university name, your UAS Challenge team name, and a full delivery address. Just one thing to note, you will need to pay for any shipping and handling costs, but the cost of the airdrop box itself is complimentary, courtesy of Airdrop Box, who are a kind supporter of the UAS Challenge. So that's everything from me. There is a question about the slides. Yeah, I'm happy to provide the slides. This webinar is also being recorded, so it will be uploaded onto the UAS Challenge YouTube channel, so the recording will be available as well.
Thanks. Yeah, there's a couple of questions about visas on the chat as well. You can see those as well.
Yeah, so in regards to the first question, we'll send the visa support letter within a week of receiving the passport information. So I would just recommend as soon as you get the passports, which I'd recommend doing yeah, as soon as you can, we'll get that over to you. And in regards to the other query, yeah, I'll follow that up. My apologies about that. I'll chase that up for you.
Cool. So thanks all. Again, we're just happy to take any more questions now that you've got. I think the message that came out clear here to all of you, please, is please, look at the deadlines. But a deadline, as I think Kristina said, and both Lambert said, does not necessarily mean at 1 minute to midnight the day of the deadline. Give yourself a bit more time. And even if you need to force a deadline yourself to say it's a week beforehand, do that, because we all have a habit of working to a deadline. So if you put another one in, you will work to that one. Honestly, that's the way it tends to work. And as Kristina said, certainly on the X-plane, that way it gives you time. You time to ensure that if there are any problems, we have another opportunity to get the files corrected. Which again, I'd strongly recommend that you do that, because that facility I think is something you probably want to do, because I know that sometimes these things can be quite complicated. So as you're aware, we've got another webinar due beginning of May, when we can go through some of these topics again. But this is really a chance to give you some warning about as we're moving into the FRR and in the X-Plane, which again are, you know, a number of weeks away, a number of months away, but they will come around really, really quickly. And you saw from Lambert's outline proposal there, you know, let's, you know, don't forget that these things can take some time, and you need to give yourself time. And the thing we keep saying every time that we have one of these challenges, you know, the great work that everybody does, give yourself time to do plenty of testing, test, and again test, because you'll be surprised how much you could improve the design and makes your experience of the challenge much better, rather than spending your entire time fixing or getting your UAS ready to fly. Let's get out there and do some flying. So please try and do that. I'll hand over some questions on the side there.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. So I can see the question, is it possible for people who are not part of the team to attend the event as spectators? At the moment, just to in terms of capacity of the site, we are limiting it to the 10 people, the 10 team members as stated in the rules. If this does change, I'll let people know, but yeah, at the moment, just to make sure we've got capacity, we are limiting it to the 10 team members that are actually taking part in the competition.
It's also worth saying that becomes an insurance issue as well. If you're attending as part of the event, as part of a team, if we start opening up the public and the spectator will be a public, then that gets into a whole different world around liability insurance. So we are something that we're looking at, but certainly at the moment that isn't the case. So thanks.
We got another. Oh, sorry, Paul.
Lambert wants to go on that one.
Well, the thing about the scoring, yes, you can get some bonus points for being on the flight line early, and so the 50 points just refers to the packaging and storage part of it. And yes, it would have been clearer if we'd separated out the flight readiness incentive, but that's an opportunity for getting 20 points extra. So the whole competition is potentially worth 820 points if you get on the flight line early. But remember, if you're late on the flight line, you will lose 20 points. So then you'd only be able to get 780 points. So yes, as a matter of clarity, we probably could have done it slightly better, but that's the answer to that question.
There's just a follow-up question to that one, Lambert. Thank you for clarifying. Is that bonus the same for the cargo delivery? Table 5 says the total is at 200, but Annex A4 says 225.
We sent out, I think, an amendment to that. No, you're right that there is an error there, and I thought that an amendment had been sent out on that, and that the maximum you can get for the cargo mass and distance is 150 points and not the 200 that's written there. So you should have seen an update come out on that.
I will follow up on that as well to make sure that has gone out.
And the next one about the optional endurance test, I mean, it's we will be expecting you to carry on doing the endurance test. It's just that if you run out of power before you get that far, clearly you've got to land with 20% of your energy remaining, and so you have to calculate how far you go into the endurance test. And so, and you score points for doing the endurance test. Apart from being late on the flight line, there are no penalty points this year. Everything is positive points. And so you just won't score if you don't do the endurance part of the the mission. I hope that's clear.
I'll just pick up the other question. We had a question about additional staff member. Again, if it's part of your team, then sorry, effectively within your 10, then I think that's okay. Their allocators being, you say they are part of your team, then that is okay. But we can't go above the number of slots. That's okay, isn't it, Emma? Yeah, that's the question.
Yeah, that's fine.
Fine. Yeah.
My next question is around what do you do with your drones before the competition starts? We are limiting. What are we in terms of overseas teams? Are overseas teams able to do some flight testing at this time? Is that the only plan flying we do outside the competition?
Yeah, so on the first day of competition for overseas teams, there will be not a trial run of the competition, but we need to do a flight test just to make sure your aircraft's safe. So it's not a trial run. No one will get trial runs. You get 2 attempts at the competition itself, or 3 attempts, as Lambert said, up to 3. But you won't get a full trial run. The overseas teams will get a flight test so that we can make sure and do some additional safety checks of theirs that we can't do with the UK teams. Anything else you want to add to that, Lambert?
No, I think that's fine. I see we maybe need to go back a bit on some of these questions. There are a lot more questions coming in here, aren't there? About the storage box for aircraft for overseas teams. I think we will have some flexibility because of what's allowed in freight in an aircraft, and so I think if you can explain the issues you have about that, we will take those into account. I think that's reasonable, Kristina.
Yeah, completely agree.
Do the points for the endurance test only begin counting after the payload has been delivered? I think in the rules that it makes it quite clear that you complete the payload drop, you overfly, I think, the landing point again, and the endurance run starts from there. Yes, following the deployment of the cargo, the UAS shall return to the launch point by the most direct route possible. And so you overfly the launch point and then continue off round on the endurance test. And so the points for the endurance test are only from the point where you've overflown the launch point. For the builder's sand within the payload, are we able to add an additional internal part which keeps the sand at one end of the box when the package is in a horizontal position? Yes, you can put anything you like into the box as long as it can be removed with the sand without any tools, but the weight that you get credited for your flying is only the weight of the sand, not of any additional packaging you've put in there. Is it possible to change the weight of the package between attempts? Yes, there's no problem with doing that. As I said, at the end of the day, it's the highest score you do on your 3 attempts that will count. And so, yes, you may discover on your first attempt that you could have carried more weight and still landed within your 20% energy remaining, and so you may want to try a heavier weight or vice versa. Yes, I see no problem with that.
Can I just add a bit to that, Lambert? So on the day of the competition, there will be a part within your area in the marquee, that will be for building of those payloads. There'll be somebody there from the committee at all points through the competition that will be supervising those being made up to make sure that there are no rule breaking, to make sure that all your parts, as Lambert's just been saying, they can be removed, it will be weighed, and then it will be sealed with a sticker, and that's what we will use to correspond when the payload is dropped. That's what it'll be measured. So it's important that when it's coming to your actual flight, you can use your own ones that you've ordered from Dropbox to do any testing, but your actual flight, you need to have one that's approved and registered with the scrutineers and the judges as going, this is your payload for that flight. So it's just something to be considered. That takes a bit of time as well. So you need to make sure prior to your flight that you've got that and it's all ready to go.
Yes, a good point. And so again, either getting your bonus points or avoiding a penalty for being early or late on the flight line, you've got to allow for that as well. There's a question on the commercial off-the-shelf items, that all that's included in that £1,000 thing are the ones on the aircraft itself, and so they're bought out components. I mean, what we would refer to as avionics and propulsion system bits that are on the UA itself. So it doesn't include your laptop or any of the ground control station equipment, and it doesn't include purchase of materials either. They're not included in COTS. The maximum speed, Chris, I can't remember, is that a ground speed or an airspeed that, well, I suppose they're both pretty much the same at the height, but I don't know how it's specified in CAP 722. Are you there, Chris?
I'm here.
Obviously not.
Anyone hear me? No.
No. Let me just have a look.
We can hear you now, Chris.
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah, no, there's no maximum speed limit in CAP 722. It's only whether you've set anything for the competition.
Oh.
Yeah.
I thought there was but we have set one for the competition. I'm just trying to find the right page.
Yeah. In terms of how it's measured, if you've got a pico tube on the aircraft, that'll be measuring airspeed. However, the waypoint mission programming and everything else will most likely be recording it from GPS, which would be ground speed.
Yes, so I can't recall. I just can't quickly find it in the rules. Well, if anyone can spot it in the rules, it's in here somewhere.
Yeah, we'll come back to that query. We'll come back to that query.
Yeah.
We'll send out an email if that's okay, Emma, and we'll just clarify to make sure that we're happy with what the rules say as well.
Yeah.
In terms of the 10 by 10 landing square, you will be given a waypoint, well, a coordinate that is the center of that square, and as long as you land within a 10 by 10 meter, which will be marked out on the ground itself, you'll get the points for that, but you won't be given the full coordinates of the 10 by 10 meter square. You'll be given the center point.
And remember, this year it's just touching down within that space. It's not coming to a standstill within it.
Yeah. The next one, dummy GPS coordinates before the competition. No, we will not give you any dummy coordinates before the GPS competition. You can go onto Google Maps. You can look at the example that we've put in the rules of the course layout, and you can devise your own from there. But we will not be giving out any dummy GPS coordinates before.
Actually, just coming back, I've just found the maximum airspeed is actually stated as 60 knots IAS, so that is actually a pitot measurement. But if you don't have a pitot system, then we will accept a GPS ground speed limitation on that, but you shouldn't be going around at more than 60 knots. There's one on public liability insurance here.
Yes, so I'm actually making, I know we've had a couple of the international teams that are asking about this and had problems last year. So I'm actually making inquiries with our insurers at the moment to see if there's something they can offer. So yeah, I'm looking into that at the moment, and I'll provide an update as soon as I can.
On the number of team members, Rod, I don't think there's any restriction on number of team members to do the assembly of the in the storage test, is there?
No, there isn't. But I would point out that the more bodies you have around the UAS, the more likely you are to knock into each other and interfere with things. So keeping it simple is probably the recommendation, but there's no limit on number of people.
Yeah, it is a very well, it's not a very tight space, but there'll be space assigned within our hangar that will be for the packaging and unpackaging of the UAS. So really think about how many people you actually need, because you do start to fall over yourself.
And conceptually, again, there's the thought about this as a humanitarian task. It could well be that you're dispatching a number of these UAS out somewhere to do the humanitarian mission, and that the team at the other end receiving them may not be vast in numbers. So if you can focus it on as few people as possible, that is best.
Next one's for you, I think, Emma.
Yeah, I'll look into that today for that team, and I'll get back to them today.
Right, the next one is on the flight termination system. Yeah, the control of the aircraft and the flight termination system has to be on the 2.4 gigahertz band, but any data you're sending back to your ground control station or anything can be on another band, such as long as the power meets the limitations that Ofcom, the UK's Office of Communication, limits you to.
So for the payload one, as long as the payload initiation for when your aircraft logs that it's been asked to drop it is within that 10 by 10 meter, then that is fine. We've just clarified the speed issue, so I don't think we need to go and do that email now. If we don't need to include a pitot tube and therefore rely on the GPS speed for the maximum speed measurement, are we going to receive a penalty? No. I think that's a simple one.
There's a question over the size of the transport box, and whether for overseas shipping you could have one the box that has a side above the rules limit. I think yes, pragmatism may well apply there for us. The idea behind this again is that this is an air portable package, so it would be to try and come in with the constraints of the of trying to send something out on a humanitarian mission, potentially at a different continent or a very different location. But yes, if there's a cost-saving measure to get something out in a standard package, yes, come with us, but provide the evidence that your the internal dimensions are within the limits of the competition.
Okay. What does the camp in Buckminster actually cover? Will it cover our complete residence in the UK or just the day shift? So for camping, you can stay from the Monday to, I think it's the Friday morning, Emma, to which you have to then be off-site Friday morning.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you get from Monday to Friday, and that covers, you can stay morning, afternoon, evening, but then you have to be gone Friday morning. And then if you're due to stay in the UK any longer than that, it's up to you to provide your own accommodation for it. We will only have people there on site from that Monday morning to that Friday morning. Are we allowed to cook on site with camping gear? And also, do you know if the catering van cater for different dietary requirements? If you've got any specific dietary requirements that you're concerned about, please email IMechE so we can try and cater for them, and if not, let you know. Are they allowed to cook with camping gear, Emma? I'm not too sure about that one.
The BMFA won't mind proper camping stoves and bits and pieces like that. The only thing they will not want is any bonfires or barbecues that might set fire or damage the grass.
The question about pilots' experience, I think, Rod, is just how many hours or how many flights that the pilot has done with the UAV, I think, is what we require on the 701.
Yes, it's literally to show the experience behind it for the pilot.
Yeah, it's worth just adding to that. On the actual competition, the only people flying your aircraft at Buckminster will be our pilots. So Chris on the call and his team, you will not be allowed, even with your own pilot, to fly on site at BMFA Buckminster for the competition. It will be our pilot. So just to clarify that, just to make sure expectations management.
I see that Team IMechE pointed out that the timeline that I requested when you put in your concept paper is in the PDR, but I don't think we've seen your PDR yet.
Just to clarify there, by the means that we fly them, the legal responsibility for any aircraft, even if it's under autonomous or automated mode, is that it has to have a remote pilot. So the aircraft you're flying are not actually autonomous because they're not going to be making their own decisions. They're only automated by following the mission of a waypoint. Under civil aviation definitions, automated and autonomous are not the same. So because we're taking off flying a mission by waypoint, we'll be connected to a remote pilot who, if necessary, and only if necessary, can terminate the flight for safety.
Sorry, can I just clarify on that, my last comment about Team IMechE? It's very helpful if people actually specify their team number. I've just confused you with another team, and so ignore that last comment.
Okay, if there are any other questions, I'll give a minute just to allow any more come in. Yeah, so if the pilot needs to activate the flight termination system, they will. But if they need to take over manual control and to bring that back to a safe distance or a safe state, then they will do that as well.
Essentially, we're just there to stop your aircraft joining the revolution against mankind, as I always say.
The cargo mass and distance rule evaluated. So the cargo mass is essentially what the mass of the payload, so the actual amount of its sand that was in your payload distribution box, and then the distance is how long it is carried around the course. The waypoints, there is an example in the rules. The waypoints are, I will say, as an insight for you, it is very similar to what is in the example we have put in the rules. So it'll be the same sort of shape and the same number of waypoints. You can add more waypoints if you want to make your flight path easier once we give you these mandatory ones that you need to get. So that is up to you. So it's important that you know how your aircraft handles, so you can take those and develop and edit them or add additional waypoints if needed. Okay. How stringent are you on the storage requirements? A couple of millimeters outside the constraints.
Well, I think, you know, if when you do this for real, a couple of millimeters matters. So the rules are the rules.
Yeah. Okay, great. One last question. If we don't have an option for manual control, will we be penalised at all? Chris?
So if the aircraft cannot be overridden, then you're not complying with the rules because you don't have a flight termination system, at which point we will not allow it to fly. I think that's the simple thing. At the end of the day, these aircraft need to be connected to a mode 2 transmitter, which we need to be able to manually override. So if we don't believe your aircraft is controllable, we won't let it fly.
And does the airbox micros empty weight
no, well,
is included in the total payload?
Yeah, it's the sand we weigh.
Yep, so the actual payload airdrop box, that will be consistent for every team. You can add more weight to it by adding in additional insertations if you want to make sure the weight and balance of it is correct. But because that will be consistent for everyone, all we are measuring is the additional amount of payload that we actually put inside the drop box, which is what will be weighed and put towards the team.
And again, that's, you know, it's the humanitarian aid that you're delivered. We're just using sand as the example of that. So that's what you're delivering.
The builder sand will be supplied by ourselves at the event. I've got lots of buckets for you. We will not run out.
No, you're not allowed to modify the drop box. The only part you can modify on the drop box is the parachute. You can put your own parachute, if you like, on it, or modify the parachute that comes with it. But the parachute must attach by exactly the same attachment points as air drop box has. But you aren't allowed to do anything else to the drop box.
And as I said previously, there will be a designated area, and that will be for the building of these the drop boxes, in which you'll be supervised, putting them together. We make sure all the components that are mandatory are there, And if you want to add any additional, you can. You cannot take things away though. And that will be sealed and signed up for you, and it'll have your flight number on, etc. So if you've got any additional clarifications, they can be done there, but we will be checking every single one. Okay, I can't see any more. I think that's the most questions we've ever had. So that's great. It's great to see everyone reading the rules and even pointing out our mistakes. Your parachute shipment will be whenever you ordered it from Air Dropbox and you get the notification from them. That is handled entirely by them. So they will be able to advise you once you've placed your order in terms of the time frame for the shipment, but we have no control on that, unfortunately.
Okay, so unless there are any final questions, I think that covers everything. So thank you everyone for joining today, and thank you as well to the committee members for your time as well. I hope that you found that useful. The recording will be, as I said earlier, made available on our YouTube channel, so you'll be able to view that afterwards as well. Yeah, and hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day.